than any other wildlife is. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about bobcats. The same thing happens with bobcats. Somebody sees this animal, and especially if they're frightened, all of a sudden this animal becomes a mountain lion, right? And we get calls all the time from people who will swear up and down that they saw a mountain lion in their backyard. And when we go and we do research and we gather scat and look for footprints, it turns out it's a bobcat. This animal is going to max out at 20 pounds. It looks like a house cat on stilts. And steroids. But they also look skinny. You know, this is the thing, is their normal healthy weight looks skinny compared to our domestic cats and dogs. A mountain lion is going to weigh over 100 pounds. A mountain lion, its body and its tail is going to be 9 feet long. A mountain lion's tail is 3 feet long. This animal is tiny compared to a mountain lion. This animal also lives on a diet of small prey. Yes, they will occasionally take cats. Yes, they will occasionally take small dogs. But they're much more likely to take rats and rabbits and squirrels and small birds. Okay? They are absolutely not a threat to children or adults. This photo was taken in Capel. In a wilderness area, bobcats would normally den underneath a rocky outcropping. But as they adapt to urban areas, the equivalent of a rocky outcropping is a deck. Underneath a deck makes a perfect den site for bobcats and coyotes. So these photos were taken by the homeowner. Okay. See, is this a problem, or is this their own private nature documentary? It's a value judgment, you know? This photo was taken in Plano, and it's really important to notice what's in the background. That is not a coincidence. Bird feeders are a magnet for bobcats and coyotes. Do bobcats eat bird seed? Ooh. Bobcats are pure carnivores, but coyotes will come up and eat the bird seed, eat the mice that have come up to the bird seed. For coyotes, a bird feeder is like a smorgasbord. For a bobcat, what this bobcat will do is sit about 10 feet away from the feeder, underneath some shrubs, and just wait, because bobcats are ambush predators. So they'll wait during the day until that nice fat mourning dove is on the ground, and in one 10-foot leap, they'll grab the mourning dove. Now, I always tell people, if you have a bird feeder, it's important to know that there's the day shift and then there's the night shift. And the bobcat works both shifts. At night, she sits about 10 feet away and waits for a nice fat rat. Okay? And I'm not saying that we should eradicate all bird feeders, because I am a bird lover and I love to see birds at my feeder. So what I'm suggesting is that we put out a small amount of seed in the morning so that it is completely gone before dark, so that the birds have eaten it completely out of the feeder, off the ground before dark. And that way we're only feeding the birds. We're not feeding the rats. So, once again, to go back to very simple, effective solutions. Restricting the food supply, eliminate access to den sites, and using aversion techniques. So that first one is the rats. It always goes back to the rats. When somebody is seeing coyotes and bobcats in their neighborhood, the real problem is rats. And I don't know if you can tell by this photo or not, but all of this down here, that's all sunflower seeds. This is directly below a bird feeder. This, and I brought copies of this for everybody. This is an excellent diagram that can be used as a checklist to make sure that there's nothing in your yard that's providing food and shelter for rats. And I'll hand this out at the end when we get finished. And a lot of the things on here are common sense. But one of the things on here is double fencing. A lot of the newer suburbs are completely outlawing double fencing because it provides such a perfect habitat for rats. The other thing is, not leaving any cat food or dog food out, any place that plumbing or wiring goes into your house, all of those little tiny gaps around there, if you've had anything new installed, make sure that there's lots of caulk, expanding foam, copper mesh, to make sure that all of those little gaps are completely sealed. That's how rats and mice get into our houses. But there's one thing on here that's really disgusting to talk about. It's something that a lot of people never think about, and that's why I'm going to talk about it even though it's really disgusting. How many of you have a dog? Okay. If there's a corner of your yard that the dog uses as its bathroom, that is a buffet for rats. Most of the dog food is so packed with nutrition, it passes through the dog largely undigested. And rats do not have the same scruples that other animals do. So that dog feces is an incredible source of food for mice and rats. I'll have people who'll say, yeah, I wondered it was just disappearing. I'd send the kids out to go clean up after the dog, and it was just gone. Well, this is what, for some people, may be the source of food for the mice and the rats in their yard. So that's something to keep in mind, is to really make sure that you've picked up after the dog every day, because otherwise it can really cause the rat population to explode. The more concentrated the food is, the larger the litter size, the more frequently the rodents will reproduce. Okay. If you're concerned about animals getting underneath a deck, underneath a shed, underneath a garage, any kind of area that's got a gap underneath it, this is what we recommend to permanently prevent animals from denning underneath. It's an L-shaped barrier made of heavy gauge welded wire mesh. The way to install it is to dig a trench around the edge of your deck and then lay the wire in there, bend it out, and put the soil back on top of it. And it has to be made with heavy gauge welded wire mesh. I'll have people who will call and they'll say, yeah, we tried that, it didn't work. What kind of wire did they use? Chicken wire. Because it was cheap, right? Chicken wire is only strong enough to keep chickens in. It does nothing to keep raccoons or coyotes or bobcats out. So it has to be heavy gauge welded wire mesh. All right, and then as far as aversion techniques, now most people will tell you when they see a coyote or a bobcat in their neighborhood, it's running. We occasionally get bobcats and coyotes that are so habituated to noise that they'll just stand and look at you because they've heard noisy people their entire life. They've lived for generations around people. They've become immune to how noisy we are. So there is occasionally coyotes and bobcats that you shout at them and they just look at you. That's rare. Usually the coyote is already running before you ever say anything. But if it is an animal that has become habituated, just grabbing the garden hose and spraying it with water. Making physical contact with that animal is like counting coup. It says, I touched you, I can kill you. Making physical contact with a wild animal is a life-changing experience for it. Shouting may not do any good, but hitting it with water or a stick or a rock will definitely teach it to stay away. Now this is just the easiest thing to do, is to grab the garden hose. But if you want to go high-tech, this is a device that hooks up to your garden hose, and we've used these even for folks who have koi ponds and they had raccoons coming up and getting the koi out of their ponds. This hooks up to a garden hose, it runs on a battery, it has a motion sensor in it, and it will be on guard all night long. And if you have a large piece of property, you can hook them one garden hose to the next, and it'll protect your entire yard. Yes?
Also works good against door-to-door salesmen.
Yes, yes. It works well against all different uninvited guests. Yes?
Back in the 70s, I built a new home out on Copper Canyon, and we have a U-shaped house. We built it and has a 30 by 8 foot back porch on it, and the garage, you step out into the garage and it opens out over that back porch. And I stepped out there one day and I heard a noise on the back porch, and of course I had a chain link fence across the back of it there. Mm-hmm. right there.
Mm-hmm.
With a lid on it.
Mm-hmm.
I looked down there and he had his arm around it like a human, and he's reaching over and trying to get that lid off, and when I stepped up to, he looked up at me like that, and then he flopped that thing over and started trying to roll it over to the fence.
That's right. He was going to take the dog food with him.
I didn't bother to go out there.
Yes, very, very good example of food as a huge motivation for wild animals.
Wondered how you could tell there was food in that.
Sense of smell. We can't even imagine what these animals experience through their nose, because our sense of smell is so dwarfed. We can't even imagine how accurate they are able to smell dog food and cat food from a very great distance, even in a sealed container. So this is a high-tech way to prevent wildlife from coming in your yard. It works for all different size animals, even stray cats, if you don't want stray cats coming in your yard. Now the next picture I'm going to show you is probably going to make you laugh, but it's a very effective way to keep coyotes and bobcats out of your yard. Super soakers will shoot 50 feet. We had a retirement community in Fort Worth that had a courtyard, and this was the type of retirement community where people could have their small pets. And there was a coyote that was coming and lounging in that courtyard every day. And the people living there were terrified. You know, they were afraid the coyote was going to get their dog and maybe even, you know, get them. And so we did a seminar on why we were the alpha animal, and that all we needed to do was act like the alpha animal, and the coyote would go away. And so they put a loaded super soaker by the courtyard door. And the next morning, the first person who saw the coyote in the courtyard grabbed the super soaker and blasted it. And that coyote was never seen again. When people are saying that the coyotes and the bobcats are acting too bold, that they're acting aggressive, what we usually find is that the humans are acting too timid, are acting too passive. A lot of times when people see a coyote or a bobcat, they'll have one of two reactions. They may run inside, close the door, and call animal control. Or the other group of people, they see a bobcat or a coyote, they pull out their camera and start taking pictures. Both of those responses teach the animal a very powerful lesson. What does it teach them?
They're in control.
They're safe. They can show themselves in front of people, because in a rural area, if a bobcat or a coyote shows itself, what happens to it? It gets shot, right? That's why we see completely different behavior in urban areas, because these animals have lived over generations of living in close proximity with people, that people are no threat. But it's very easy to unteach that by very simple techniques. Number one, removing the food. Number two, eliminating access to den sites. And if they're still being seen, then hit them with a blast of water. At this point, I'll hand out the brochures and we'll go over, make sure that we've covered all these. The other species that we would see in the city are the ones that I mentioned at the beginning: the raccoons, possums, squirrels. All of those animals are thriving in urban areas. Babies in strollers, absolutely no threat.
So when you're walking down the street with a stroller,
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing that would make them come get you.
No, they're looking for small prey. They're looking for